Hello again. We've talked about many of the applications connected with the definite integral of the supply and demand curve, which led us eventually to the total social gain. So here I've pulled a problem that should not be hard to find if you follow the links that I've put out there. I'm going to walk through it. The website I pulled it from gives you the answer but does not show you how to get it all the way through. So let's try and make up the difference here. So we have that the supply can be calculated by 10 plus q squared, which is listed first, but let's see here. I have gone to Desmos and actually pulled a graph here. So I made it blue, which is the consistency I've done. But the supply would be 10 plus q squared. And the demand is 210 minus q squared. So we've done that in red. Demand of whatever quantity we pick is 210 minus q squared. And we're going to find several things here. We're going to walk through it. So let's see here. What we have is we're going to find, first off, the consumer surplus, the producer surplus, and the total social gain at the market equilibrium. Now, it may not be too hard to look at the graph and see that the equilibrium point is over here, but as far as looking at the graph, that's kind of a guess. You might come up with what looks like 10 and 110, and that is possibly right, but let's make sure we get it correctly. Okay, so we'll say that the equilibrium, too many L's, equilibrium is the demand equal to the supply. So demand is 210 minus q squared, and we'll set that equal to 10 plus q squared. Now that might look scary at first, but we've got a quadratic we're going to solve. We'll pull everything to one side, so if we add q squared on both sides, we'll get 2q squared on the right. We'll subtract 10 from both sides. We'll have 200 on the left, so we have q squared equals 100. Now in an algebra class, q would be plus or minus 10, but there's no way to make negative 10 items. So we know that the number of items to make and sell that would balance things out and give us the most social gain will be 10. So we can come over here and we know that q or x is 10. And then if we want to go back, we can put it in either one. We can put 10 in the demand, which will be 10 plus 10 squared, which will be 110. So, the graph was accurate, but if we didn't have a way to graph it, or we weren't sure if our graph was accurate, I would not want to guess. But we have an equilibrium point of make and sell 10 items at $110 a piece. So now we've got to do the consumer surplus. So let's see here. The consumer surplus, the consumer is based off of the demand. Okay, so consumer surplus. So we said that that would be equal to, we would take basically this equilibrium point and cut it off here. So that equilibrium point, as far as our q's, runs from 0 to 10. Okay? From 0 to 10, right here. Okay? So we're looking for, first of all, this shaded, well, it's not shaded yet, but it would be shaded up top. Let me make it green. Well, let's make it, I don't know if this is red or not. This area up here. Okay, this would be our consumer surplus. That's money that is saved by the consumer. They don't have to pay the max price they're willing to. So let's see. That was the demand curve, which is 210 minus q squared, and we would subtract off what's under there, which is 110. That's the price point, dq. So we can clean that up. It might be worth making this 100 minus q squared dq. And let's move this up for now. We might come back. But if we integrate that, we get 100q minus 1/3 q cubed, and we can put a plus c there, but when we plug in the 0 and 10, it won't matter. So when we plug in the 10, let q equal 10, we will get 1,000 minus 1/3 of 10 cubed, which is 1,000. And then if we plug in 0, we get basically 0 minus 0. So I'm going to pick up my calculator. You won't see it, but 1,000 minus 1,000 divided by 3. And I get 666.7 is what I will call it. Okay, so that should be the consumer surplus. So let's take that and then calculate the producer or the supplier surplus, which, let's see here. Let's go put a red box around this since it was the consumer surplus. So let's go to the producer surplus. And that is money that the producer makes that they don't necessarily expect to make or don't need to make that many items. So this is above the producer line but under the equilibrium mark. So let's see here. We're going to integrate this, and once again we're going to do it from 0 to 10. So we're going to do this from the top curve, which is the green line here, which is 110, and we're going to subtract the supply curve, which happened to be 10 plus q squared. Okay? 10 plus q squared. Let's pull it back down for a little bit and leave it down so we can, well, we can't pull it too far down. And that will be dq. So before I integrate, I like to clean up if possible. So 100 minus 110 minus 10 is 100, and then minus q squared. So I am going to slide right back up here. But the integration is 100q minus 1/3 q cubed. You could put a plus c, but when you do your limits of integration from 0 to 10, it will get absorbed. So if we let q equal 10, we will have 1,000 minus what we just saw was 1/3 times 10 cubed. That is weird. So let's see here. So then we also have let Q equal 0, so we get 0 minus 0. So if we clean this up, it looks exactly like what we had. So it looks like the producer surplus is also 666.7. So let's go back up and look at our graph. It could be a little misleading. But if we do look at it, it does look like the part here above my green equilibrium line would be symmetric with the part below. So that's kind of interesting. But if we wanted to take that and we wanted to do total social gain, I gave you the formula to where you could say, in one instance, you could say the limits of integration are 0 to 10, and you could say demand, not that, minus the supply, dq. So basically you could take the red curve minus the blue curve and plug everything in after integrating and get it that way. But it's also this red shaded part plus this blue shaded part. So it's also, we could say or, we could say it's the consumer surplus plus the producer surplus. So there's a little challenge. You could work it either way. You could go back and plug your formulas in, integrate, do everything, but this was 666.7, this was 666.7. So I'm sorry, I'm picking up a calculator. Basically this gives me 1333.3. So that is the total social gain. Okay. Oh, that was interesting. But that is the money saved by the consumer and gained by the supplier that was not necessary for them to make this product. Okay, so this is a pretty long problem. We got through part A, so I'll do a separate video and pick up in part B.